All right, we are live. Thank you for joining the InnerStrength Empowerment Hour. I am Laura DePietro stand-in. We are in episode 41, and we are so excited to talk to you today about boundaries. This is something we talk about a lot in the group, and it's something that I have found throughout my career that women really need to talk about. And so this is a great topic today. We might not even get all the way through it. This might end up being a two-parter because we always run long as it is, and so we may just need to make this two things. But we're gonna dive headlong into it. So I want to welcome my success coaches, Joanne and LT, and my client Nancy, who has a lot of experience in this area, similar to what I have, having not set boundaries and then setting the boundaries. And she has a lot to say on this subject as well. So we're thankful that all of you guys are here today and that we can get into this. We encourage commentary and we encourage questions. And, so please, whether you're watching the replay or you're joining us live, we would love to hear from you. So thank you, ladies. And let's jump in. So the first thing I want to do is define a boundary, because that is, a lot of people don't even know what a boundary is. And what it is good fences make good neighbors. Okay, so if you think of your boundary like a fence between you and your neighbor's house, and like I have actually done a blog on this before where I talked about when I was growing up, we did not have a fence between us and our neighbor's house, which meant their dogs were always coming into our yard. And it was this fight that went on for like my entire childhood instead of somebody just putting up a fence. And so it was this, just like my dad and the guy next door would come to blows over this every couple months. And it would just be like this huge ordeal. And at the time, I honestly didn't think, I just thought, this is, why are their dogs coming over? Because I was a kid. But when I grew up, I was like, my parents had, why didn't somebody put up a fence? Like, this is craziness. Like, what this is. So this is what boundaries are like, and they're non-negotiable. So when you set a boundary, this is not a negotiation process. It's not like, hey, let's everybody get together and decide where my boundaries are. No, you put up the fence, that's where your boundary is. So I just want to define that as we go into this, because it's something I think even saying boundaries, women don't even necessarily even understand what that means right off the bat. So what about for you guys, did you know what a boundary was, and were you setting them before we started working together? We'll start with you, Nancy. Nancy's the guest.
Nancy, go ahead.
Yeah. For years, I didn't know what a boundary was. I didn't have them. And it was about the time we started working together that I was realizing that that's what I needed to do, is what were they, and what would I allow to have around me, and what would I not? So,
right.
You and Joanne helped me a great deal with discovering what those were.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I know Joanne claimed she did not know before we met what it was. So can you say more about that?
No, I had no idea. I don't even know that I had heard the term or had anybody ever mention what it was, or I don't even think I knew anything about it. And so therefore I had none also.
Right.
And I had heard about it, and I had read the book on it by Dr. Henry Cloud called Boundaries, because that was recommended to me years and years ago by one of the counselors when I was in counseling at the time. And it was to deal with some family members that we had. And, but I didn't keep good boundaries with myself.
Okay.
You can have a knowledge of what they are, but I was not executing them very well. I'll put it that way.
Right. And that's exactly what we're going to get into today, because whether you didn't know what they are, don't know what they are, haven't set them, or you need to set them, but you're not doing it, the results are the same. So that's what we're going to get into. So let's start with our family of origin, because I do want to get into the significant other thing, that, the spouse part, but I think this starts way earlier than that. And I want to ask, do you or have you had issues with your mother? Because that is what I have heard over and over and over again as I've been doing this. And it's, you know, I have women who are our age. I'm 51. Had to think about that for a second. I'm 51, and I know all of you guys, we're all similar age. But I talk to women our age all the time who are like, they feel like they can't do what they want because their mother is still controlling them. So I want to start with that. What, if you had those issues, what did they look like? And what were the expectations surrounding things like food, marital status, your role in the family, those types of things? Anyone?
Mother issues.
Yeah. That's a whole episode right there. I'm writing it down.
It is.
Yeah.
Right. Right. I don't know about everybody else, but man, my mother was always overweight because she was severely depressed and stuff. And so she always tried to sabotage us with our weight, and try to manipulate it. And that was one of the things. And then she always had to do the guilt trip on everything that happened. Yes, I'll give you this, but I'm sacrificing this for myself, for you to have it.
Right.
And so we always had that growing up. And then as I got older and I got married, it was like, what? You don't make your husband's lunch for him to take to work every day, and you don't make your kids as breakfast and lunch? I'm like, no, they have cereal and they make their own, you know, and feeling like I wasn't good enough because she wasn't, you know, she was telling me things that she thought I should be doing. And, you know, and it's interesting because I didn't know what boundaries were, but man, when I moved away, that was my own boundary. And I didn't realize I was setting it because I needed the space to be able to say, okay, I can call you when I want and tell you what little I want to tell you, without, you know, causing any waves. And I didn't even realize at that time that that's what I was doing to myself because I needed it. So, but yeah. Oh, mother issues. Yes.
All right, guys, what about you?
Well, I think that does need to be a whole episode or two because, you know, I have a lot of those. But I'll just start by saying my mom is not healthy mentally. And it took me years to actually realize that because, you know, when you're a kid and it's all you know, you just think that's how it is. And I would say she's also a master manipulator. So even as an adult, when I realized she wasn't mentally well, I still almost felt like I wasn't mentally well because that's how she was making it seem like there was no problem with her. So yeah, I had a lot of, you know, she grew up in an abusive home, a very, very abusive home to my grandmother and to her brothers. So when she started her family very, very young at 17, she was broken in that relationship as well. And so was my dad. So my view of what I thought life was supposed to be like and what family structures were supposed to be like was very, very, very skewed. So they divorced when I was 4, and my mom got remarried to my stepdad, who was also abusive. And so my view was, you have to have the meal on the table. You have to have the laundry folded and put away. You have to, you know, put your lipstick on before he walks in the door. Because if she didn't, she was getting abused. And so for me growing up, I thought that's the role of a wife. That's the role of a mother, because I didn't always witness the abuse because I would just go in my room. But I witnessed it all day, always having to cross all the T's and dot all the I's before he got home. Like, I don't know if anybody ever saw Sleeping with the Enemy, but that's kind of how I grew up, like with always that fear. So I think a lot of my things that I took into my life as an adult were based on completely wrong views of what a wife and a mother and an adult woman should look like.
Yeah, I do want to say that also my mom, has definitely got some mental issues. But what I want to be really clear about is that is not an excuse for any adult to act the way that they do. And so what I always experienced as a child was other adults in my life going, well, your mom's just like that. No matter how abusive or crazy she was being, they were enabling her. And that was, as a child, I just felt like I completely vulnerable because nobody was protecting me. They were protecting her. And they were saying, and she was protecting my stepdad. he would act crazy, and she would just be like, you know, it was an untouchable thing. We weren't allowed to address it. And we would be told things like, you know, you have it better than so many other people. And, you know, so it also makes you feel like your feelings aren't valid. So I just wanted to insert that, you know, people can have mental health problems, and that doesn't excuse the way that they treat other people in their lives. And I know for me, I was in terms of the family, I was in charge because I was the oldest. And so there would be a list of chores that my mom would leave on the refrigerator every day. And I was in charge of making sure they all got done, even if my brothers didn't do anything. Because they, you know, so I learned at a really young age that the boys could get away with a lot, you know, and that I was basically, it was all on me, not just as the oldest, but as the girl, because as I got older, you know, my brothers had so much more freedom. They could get away with a lot of different stuff. My mom was definitely like, you know, she was always looking over any problems that they had and trying to help them and coddle them. And with me, it was the exact opposite. So it was kind of a thing where she was like that with my, you know, stepdad a little bit, and she was like that with my brothers. So I grew up in that environment where I was like, okay, so men can act badly and not do their part. And I, you know, and women just kind of have to put up with it. Like, this is just how it is. And so, you know, so I think a lot of us grew up in that, whether it was an abusive home or not. Like even Glennon Doyle talks about in Untamed, how she was unconsciously letting her son get out of doing chores. And her, you know, wife said to her, like, why are you making our daughters do this and not our son? And she was like, I don't know why I'm doing that. And that's how it starts. You know, like when we were at family gatherings, the women cleaned up afterwards and the men all went and sat down. So it starts young without you even thinking, like I wasn't thinking at the time, like, why are all these men sitting down and not doing shit? You know, like I wasn't thinking about that. Like, but now I look back and I'm like, hey, you know, the women did all the cooking and, you know, typically all the cleaning up to make sure everybody's coming over and all of this stuff, all the planning. And then they do all the cleanup and the men go sit down and watch football or something. And you don't think about that stuff. You just kind of accept that this is the world that we live in. Yeah. What about you, LT? I know we've had your mom on the show and she's a sweetie pie. So
she is. I have a mom that has multi layers, and I kind of have an early mom and a later mom, because things changed in my house after my dad had open heart surgery, and life was different as we knew it from that moment on. And that was from when I was 10 on. So it was almost idyllic from everybody's standards. My aunts, my cousins, everybody tells me. And I have fleeting memories, and I wish I could remember more, but from the time I was born until I was 10, just almost Beaver Cleaver-ish. And I mean, really, I'm being the honest truth about that. But after the age of 10, it just went to hell in a handbasket at my house, for lack of a better term. My dad came home from the hospital and said that life had dealt him a bad hand. He was tired of being the nice guy, and he was fed up with a lot of stuff, mad, angry, bitter, skewed. Look at the way he was looking at the world was skewed, and we all got the shrapnel of that, and that continued forward. And my mother did everything but stand on her head to get him back, because she just thought, we're going to get through this. And we never got through it. And it was to her great detriment and to her expense. And so what she did was she threw herself into volunteer work, because that's where she got her affirmation and her atta girls. And, you know, everybody loves my mother. That really, she is heart of gold. She is a servant to the core. She is generous to a fault. She was an absolute doormat with my dad, and the person she wanted to love her the most didn't. And it changed her, and it changed me.
Yeah.
And so, but we made it through, and I couldn't wait to go to college. I peeled out of that driveway in 2 seconds flat, and I was like, bye, everybody. But, you know, because the worst part of that time, it had times where it stalled, but at the height of where it was the worst from when I was 10 to 18, which is kind of a bad time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You're
And
going
so
through
that,
life changes
yeah,
yourself. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was. And I, I saw my mom, she had two nervous breakdowns where she had to be institutionalized. She got down to 100 pounds at one point. She looked like literally walking death. And, I was 14 at the time. I had to go stay with my friend for a little while. So, it's just, it was sad to watch. It was hard to watch. It was hard to watch your mother come home from school and be in the fetal position in the floor. I did that many days.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very hard to watch.
Right. Yeah. My mom was it was a little different with her because she was taking it out on us.
Yeah.
And so she would say things like, you should never have kids. I wish I never had kids.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So it was a little different flavor.
Right. A little different in that aspect. And I will say that my dad had a very demanding job and he traveled a lot and he traveled internationally quite a bit. And it was such a sense of relief when he was gone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We had a freedom, we had a lightness, and then the wet blanket and the anxiety when he came back.
Mm-hmm.
And, I spent a lot of time in my room.
Yep.
And,
me too.
It was just that anticipation of, Dad's coming home today. It was a nerve wracking. But the minute he left, we were like, oh,
right.
But, I say all of this and I say it with kind of a mixed bag in my heart because, as I've told you all and shared many times, my dad died 2 years ago and I had a reconciliation with him and it was a tender, tender moment that I'll carry with me forever. But these things did happen.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But we did reconcile at the end and I'm very grateful for that.
Well, and so what, the problem is, I think that a lot of us, it is so precious that you were able to get that and that you have such a great relationship with your mom today.
Yes.
A lot of us don't get that.
Yes.
And so what I hear from women repeatedly is similar to my experience because my mom, as time went on, she was just as controlling of us and critical of us as adults, especially me, as I got older, that she was when I was younger. I mean, it just never got any better. And in fact, she just it seemed to be meaner about it. And this is the kind of thing that manipulation is what I see again and again when I talk with women. And, because I didn't comply, I am the black sheep in my family. And that's something that's really hard because there's a lot of women out there who are afraid to set boundaries with their family because they know they don't want to be left out. They don't want to not be invited to things. They don't want to be ostracized. They don't want to be the focus of anybody else in the group because in my family is very matriarchal. And so my mom sort of, whatever my mom thinks is what everybody thinks. That's the way that it was always, that's just the way it is. And so the reason that I'm a black sheep is because I would say like, hey, this isn't right. Whereas everybody else would be like, I'm not messing with mom.
Right.
So when I decided to get healthy, my mom and really my whole family, but especially, my mom was like, vegan, plant-based, like that's, ridiculous. And I know that Joanne, you are having.
I am still currently having.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I get, there's just so many women that are still like, I can't go out to eat with my mom without her saying something. I can't go to a family dinner. And it's like, and they're like, why does she care? Why? And it's not about the food. That's the thing. This is a control issue. So I know, Joanne, you have a lot to say about this, with your mom and how she's trying to, and she even, made a big deal in front of your family and made things difficult recently. So can you just say more about how you are trying to handle the situation?
Well, because I already know how she would act about anything, I did not tell her that I was joining your program or I'm a grown woman. I don't need to tell all my business. But well, here I am telling all my business. But
Not to
But
her, just not to her.
I'm specifically not telling her because she
Right.
is a critic to the core. And so I didn't tell her for a long time. And then COVID happened and then we didn't see each other. Well, the first time she saw me, then I had lost a considerable amount of weight. And so had my husband because he was doing it with me. And right away, what are you doing? Why do you look so skinny? Why do you? And then she would turn on my husband, and always in a public setting. Like, and my husband is just cannot deal with her because he just shuts down because she's so over the top. She turns to him in front of everyone and puts him on the spot. Is she making you eat that rabbit food? Is she doing this to you? Blah, blah, blah. And then she'll do it to my kids in front of me. And everybody is just in this horrible place of, oh my God, what just happened? Because you don't even know what to say. And so this has gone on for, probably a year. And then the last time we saw her, a couple months ago, we were all out to dinner, which I did not want to do because I know how it's going to end. I was not saying a word. I was, because I just know not to bring it up. So she's reading the menu, and without saying something to me, she's reading the menu going, oh, I just don't know what to order without offending somebody at the table. If anybody at the table wants steak, go ahead. I'm buying. You get steak. Don't let anybody else at the table tell you what not to get. So I'm literally sitting right next to her. So she's not addressing me, but she's addressing everybody else about me. And I'm like sitting there like totally zen. Like, this is comical to me because of what she's doing. I don't want to make a big deal because we're in a restaurant. So then after dinner, I held it together. She kept those kind of things up the entire probably hour and a half, nonstop, offering me things at the table. Here, have these hot wings. You want these hot wings? Like right in my face. And then we get to the parking lot and I thought, oh God, we made it. We made it. We're just going to go. We're going to be done. And we're talking about her vacation. She's going to go to this boutique to buy shoes. And in the middle of the sentence, it was like a switch flipped. And she goes, what are you doing? Why do you look so unhealthy? And like, she's grabbing her neck. She's like, you're just so thin. You just look unhealthy at this point. And I mean, just attack mode. Like she wasn't getting to me in the restaurant because I wasn't letting it happen. And so I think her full out last stop was just attack you personally and in front of everyone, and I was like, did that just happen? Like, it was one of those moments where you really would question your own sanity. Like, did that just happen? Because that couldn't have just happened. Yeah. But that's what she still does to me to this day. And that was the day I said, I found my voice and I said, you may not ever comment on my weight again, whether my weight is up, whether my weight is down. You may not speak to me like that ever again. And I mean, I was calm, I was firm, and I got in the car and we left. And she's runs off in the parking lot screaming at me the whole way. And my whole family, the whole hour ride home was like, don't listen to her. She's just unhealthy. She just does this stuff, And I'm like, no, I'm not speaking with her again. There has to be a boundary because this is how it's going to go every time. If I don't set that hard boundary, she's going to keep doing it. It's going to get worse.
And I set that boundary with my mom, and for talking to me in, similar ways, as I said before, like when I was really heavy at a family gathering, she said, Lori, I want you to stand up so everybody can see how fat you are, like stuff like that.
Yep.
And when I finally set a boundary with her and said, listen, you can't talk to me like that anymore. And so when you do, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to argue with you because they love engagement. So I'm going to just remove myself from the situation. And she was surprised. And for about a month, she was okay. And then she started in again. And I kept my boundary. I'm like, as we discussed, per my last email, this is not okay. I'm removing myself. And she's barely spoken to me since. And it's been many years. But sometimes I think that's the hard part is that, you said it when you set a boundary with somebody, it's not your job to figure out how they're going to deal with it. Right. It's your job to just hold the line. That's it. That's all you got to do. And so, but that's hard because now I don't, get invited to family gatherings. I don't, because the whole family is part of that. They're like, well, if you're not talking to mom, because my mom's also the gravy train, the money. And so, that's the other part of it. And so I think in family dynamics, it can be really difficult. And I see some of the people who are watching today, and I know some of you have these issues because I've talked to you about it. And anybody who wants to chime in here with their experience, if you want to, feel free to do that. And I want to talk about how this turned into so these are boundaries that we need to set with our family, but how this turned into how we live as adults in terms of how we view ourselves, how we view our role in a family, what happened with our significant others. But do you guys want to say anything before we move on to that subject?
Well, I'll just say that my mother has embraced this lifestyle, and she thinks that you hung the moon with her own two hands. And when she sees me, she says, "Oh, you just look wonderful." And then she'll tell my people in her facility, "Look, my daughter's doing this plant-based diet. Y'all need to be eating plants." She is like so funny about it. And she's done it for herself. And she has really had an improvement in her health, because when I went to get her a year and a half ago, she could barely get out of the bed. So eating this way has really improved her on all levels. She's back to playing bridge with all of her friends and doing her normal activities that she can somewhat do, for an 81-year-old.
Yeah, I know that. And we actually have had, for those of you guys who don't know, I don't remember which episode it was, but
it was Aging Gracefully.
Aging Gracefully. Okay. So we had, you can look that, if you go to the guides, all of our episodes are up there. So that's at the top of the group. But we had her on, and that was a great episode. But yeah, so it's not everyone's mom. But it's definitely a big enough problem that it's something that needs to be addressed, because I talk to way too many women who are going to family gatherings, going to restaurants, or just hearing from your family that you don't get to make your own choices about your effing food. What? And I always, though, they say these things to me, and I'm like, I have no filter anymore, y'all. And I'm like, can you remind me how old you are? And they'll start laughing. They're like, I know. I'm like, no, you don't know. Like, this needs to stop. Because here's the thing, our kids are seeing this. And that's why I wanted to ask Joanne about that particular incident, because our girls need to see us standing up for ourselves. Our sons need to see it too. They need to see it. So
it was important.
And your girls got to see you use your voice, and that's going to empower them to use their voice, obviously not against you, but against other situations where somebody is trying to tell them, because of my expectations, you're not allowed to do XYZ. So, what now in my house, we did not talk about politics. I knew my parents voted. And so that was, I saw that. We were never involved in any conversations as kids or teens or whatever about politics. That was never part of anything. We didn't talk about money. My mom was in charge, we didn't have, my dad we didn't have any homework help from him. He was more the rule enforcer and the breadwinner type of person, and the chauffeur. They somewhat made financial decisions together, but my mom did all the bills and all the taxes all the time. That was like a huge deal. She'd spread out the bills every month, and she would be in charge of making sure things got paid. She did all the grocery work, or all the groceries, all of the cooking. They shared some of the household activities, chores, but it was definitely more, my mom was definitely in charge of all that. And like I said, it was more like holidays and stuff like that. Like there'd be no point in asking my dad what's going on about anything. He just had no clue. And that's definitely, what I'm getting at is, I feel like, because, and also we never talked about sex. My mom never, so I know my grandma never talked to my mom about it because she mentioned that. And so she sat me down at 8 years old in the bathroom and was like, explained the mechanics of sex. Here's how somebody gets pregnant and you better not do it. So that was the only,
That's
that
more
was
than
it.
I got.
Well, and right. Okay. So that's, and I'm sure that's what she was thinking, is that I didn't even get this. I didn't even know what it was. And so now, you know, before anybody else tells you different, which is, you know, I mean, I'm grateful for that. But that was the only conversation that we ever had about it. And after that, it was like this almost a shameful type of conversation. You're not going to talk about this. You can't, you know, you are not allowed to be a sexual being, basically, right? I mean, you're just like, that's not, we're going to act like that just doesn't ever happen. So I think when we don't talk about these things, we don't feel empowered in these areas. I didn't know anything about politics. I got to be an adult and I didn't even know how to vote. I didn't know how to find out who to vote for or anything else. I didn't know how to manage money. I didn't know, you know, all I knew about sex was, you know, my experience and the mechanics of it. Like I didn't have any idea about relationships or anything like that because we didn't talk about those things. And so I think that all of that, you know, sort of went into the way that I viewed things as an adult. And so I'm wondering what you guys think about that, like what your, you know, what kind of role you thought women should be taking on as adults with kids, or, you know, how much you felt you should be involved in finances, you know, all of those things. How was that, you know, put into place by what you experienced as a kid? You can start, Nancy.
Oh, okay. You know, my dad was extremely busy. We had kind of like a mini farm in California that I grew up on. So he'd go to work and he would come home and he was out on the property taking care of things. And he would come in and eat dinner and go back out and work in the garden or something and then come back in and we'd be going to bed. So he was, you know, he was there, but he wasn't, you know,
Right.
and so, and he was a very soft-spoken, very passive individual. So my mother definitely had the control of everything in the house.
Rolled the roost. Yeah.
Yes, she did. And, you know, and she was in the middle of everything that we did. You know, she, you know, would wait for us up when we came back from dates and, you know, and it had to be back at midnight. And if we weren't in by, you know, 11:59, she was out there pulling us out of the car kind of a thing, you know. And, you know, so I grew up thinking that women do everything, absolutely everything, you know. So, you know, you never have help to, you know, you do the laundry, you do the cooking, you do the cleaning, you know. And it's interesting because I was so ready to leave the house because of everything that was going on, and I ran away as fast as I could. And I ran into another situation with my first husband that was actually worse than my mother. And so I was okay with sitting back and letting him control the finances because that was his control over me. And so I had nothing, no ability to, I mean, I had no credit, I had nothing. And I was okay with letting him do that because I played that role as a younger child. So I was okay with that. But yet I was made to feel guilty that I didn't do certain things in the house. And, you know, I was his trophy wife, like, oh, look at my beautiful wife. She can do blah, 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 you know, but don't look at me because I'm very insecure about myself, but look at her because I married to her. And he would ridicule me and berate me constantly to get me to do things that he thought would be presentable to others. And so the way things were in my house, you know, growing up, very much carried over into my adulthood, you know. And even when I got out of that very abusive marriage, because I saw what it was doing to my kids. And when I got out of that, and I, you know, I thought I was good at, you know, being myself and, you know, and everything, but I wasn't. I just ran back into a second marriage that wasn't as bad, but it was still, you know, very much the same.
That's the same thing happened to me. Like I started off in this really abusive situation because there was also a lot of violence in my home. And when I got past that, I didn't marry someone who was abusive. And so I thought I'm doing great. I'm doing so much better. it was just a different kind of abuse.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all it was. It was, better than getting physically abused. I'll say that for sure. But it was somebody who didn't approve of me, who always was condescending, who didn't want me to work, but also was pissed that I wasn't bringing in any money,
Right.
and would make sure I knew it, who did not do any of the housework, any of that stuff, but would, berate me because things didn't look right.
Right.
And also wanted 100% control of our finances, which because I had never been brought up with any kind of money talk, nothing, I just assumed, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not really good at that stuff. I'm not really sure what I'm doing. So that's fine. I'll let him handle all that. Comes time to get a divorce, and I have zero money. I have nothing in my name, nothing. Everything that we had was in his name. All of our bank accounts were in his name. I had absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And so these are the situations that women get themselves into. And, I vowed from that point forward, I'm never going to be in that situation again. I'm never not going to have money in my name. You don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
Even if you're in a great marriage, that's, you don't know if you're in a great marriage and nothing is in your name and something happens to your husband,
Right.
you're still in trouble. There's still problems there. So it's like, as women, we have to think ahead. And I think we're just so used to playing this role that we're not thinking about the fact that we're giving away so much of our power.
Right.
Stephanie says, my parents shared a lot of home responsibilities, cleaning, paying bills, so I expected that in my marriage. But my husband grew up in a home where they had a maid who cooked and cleaned. So he doesn't think about helping with the cleaning. I know he would be willing to help, but he doesn't think of it. And I am not good about asking him. I want him to think of it on his own. I know.
Oh, I think she should get a maid.
Right.
She needs a maid.
Stephanie, that's the only answer. You got to get a maid.
Right. Gotta get a maid.
And actually, I think we all should get maids nowadays.
Yes.
I want him to think of it on his own. I know I need to be better at saying what I need. Yes. Oh my God. Like
that was me in a nutshell. I wanted him to see things that needed to be done instead of asking. And so then that turns into kind of like a little bitterness that you have with yourself. You get mad about things. And really, my husband would do anything. I mean, honestly, he's the most wonderful person. He would. He just needs to tell him ABC 1, 2, 3. He'll do it, but he's not going to see it.
Right. Right. That's the thing is I think as, even when you're in a good relationship, a lot of us really lack any kind of conflict resolution skills.
Mm-hmm.
So it's uncomfortable to say, especially as women, when you're brought up that you should be doing all this stuff, like it feels uncomfortable, especially if your husband's the breadwinner, right? Because you grew up in this nuclear situation, this nuclear family where he just does his own thing. He's the breadwinner and then he gets to do whatever he wants. It's not comfortable to say, hey, I need you to help out. I need you to do this and this and this.
That's right. And that's how my
just,
mother grew up for sure. And that's why whenever we're going back way when the kids were little, I'm not talking about recent, way back. And she would say, you don't need to bother him with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's trivial to him. Lori, you don't need to talk. And I'm like, it's kids. What?
Right.
I couldn't get it because I thought we were more 50-50 on things. So that's when I learned if I needed to complain, I didn't need to complain to her. I would call somebody else on that subject because, she was always going to say that you could be married to a XYZ. And it was always some extreme example,
Oh,
so.
Right. Yeah. I mean, even when I was married to, someone who was physically abusing us, people in my family would defend him.
Yeah.
And it was, it was still, when I got a divorce, even though he was abusive physically and in many other ways, the stigma was mine. I was the one now I'm a single mother. Now I have a failed marriage. Now I am a victim of domestic violence. Instead of saying, here's an abuser, here's somebody who destroyed his marriage, here's somebody who used his kids and his wife. It's totally different for women. So we know also that if we put our foot down and that boundary isn't met, like if we say, here's what I need, and the person says no, that happens too, then there is a real good chance that you're going to have to carry that all the way out. And you don't want to get a divorce, because as a woman, you're the one who typically gets the most responsibility for the kids. You're the one who has to fight to get a certain amount of child support to get that help. You know, you're the one who is going to be carrying that stigma. Now you're a single mom saddled. How many times we heard that with your kids? And then, you know, no man wants to date somebody who has somebody. It's just this whole thing.
Yes,
like,
that is why my mother never left, because of all of what you're just saying. And she said I would be trading one set of problems for another. So she looked the other way, and she paid a very high price. And it affected her physically. It affected, as she has anxiety, it affects the way she looks at things. As close as we are and as much as we do together, she still keeps me a little bit at arm's length, because I don't think she could handle if something happened with us. So if I keep her, I'm close to you, but I'm gonna keep you right here, just right here, because if I let you in, I will be destroyed. And that's, you know, I've lived with that my whole life, that I can remember, that I've always been just a little bit. And that's the effect of that. And if anybody needed to get a divorce, I mean, it would have been her, and she would have been in her early 40s and could have had another life. But see, she didn't think she could. She didn't think she could.
Exactly. My mom, for all of her issues, she definitely was living in this world where she was afraid to be on her own.
That's it.
And so instead of just admitting that, she blamed us. I wish I never had kids. If I didn't have kids, I could get out of this marriage, where we were like, please get out of this marriage.
Right.
Don't let that out. We were like waiting for that. But instead, you know, so, you know, I think but it goes back to growing up in a situation where you don't feel empowered. You feel like the man has all this control. How are you going to live on your own? You don't know anything about money, and you don't know anything about being a breadwinner, and you don't know, you know what I mean? So then, you know, like the 60s come along, and the women's revolution and all of that, which was amazing. I mean, we didn't have the right to vote before all that, y'all. So for people who like think feminism is a bad word, I think you need to do your homework, because we couldn't even get a bank account in our own name.
Yeah.
So like, there's things that we couldn't do before these women's movements. But all that happened then was we went from just not being able to get a job and do all that stuff to now we're doing everything. We're doing all the stuff at home. And we got a job. Instead of now we have this equal balance. So we still have so much work to do in this area. Were you going to say anything about this, Nancy?
Well, I just think that that's the hard part, is there's that expectation of, you know, we have to work 40 plus hours a week and then come home and still manage the house and cook and clean and grocery shop, when the, you know, other person gets the chance to sit and relax and decompress and, you know, whatever. And it's hard. And what I've learned is, you know, I grew up in a family where you never saw conflict. My parents took everything behind closed doors. And we were taught as kids that we had to say, I'm sorry for everything, even though it wasn't your fault. So I grew up taking the blame for everything, because I didn't like confrontation, because that's how I was raised. And so as I got older, I realized that I was saying I was sorry because I didn't want others to suffer or struggle or view me, you know, differently, or, you know, I wanted to keep the peace. And then I had to realize that those that were trying to control me, who were trying to, you know, manipulate me or keep me in this role that I didn't want to be in anymore, they're the ones, like Joanne's mother, that fought the hardest to keep you there. You know, they're the ones, because the ones that, you know, you're able to set the boundaries with and they're okay with it, they understand it because they're struggling with it too. But those that want to continue to keep you in that role and keep you where you are, that's where it gets really difficult. You have to have those hard boundaries, because, you know, in a relationship with your children, with coworkers, with, you know, a spouse, with anything, you know, it's such a hard place to be, because you're going to hurt people, but you have to get to that point. I remember I was in therapy when I was going through my second divorce, and I said, you know, said something about, I was feeling bad because I said, you know, set a boundary to my now ex-husband, And I said to the therapist, I said, I feel bad that, he was so angry. It's my fault. And she's like, no, 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 no. It is not your fault that he's mad. He's mad because of his own self. And you have to understand that he has to take ownership for his own emotions.
Yes.
You do not have control over his emotions. You need to
Right.
stop that right now. You need to realize that what you do does not affect everybody around you. That's their own decision. And that was the biggest aha moment for me, to be able to say, oh yeah, it's not my fault that they're mad.
So, right. That's the other thing as women is somehow we are the keeper of everybody's emotions.
Yeah.
Somehow, not only we have to anticipate the needs of other people, which is exhausting, and we have to be responsible for how they respond to everything.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that is, it's impossible. It is impossible. And so all of the things you said, Nancy, like we have to be in charge of everything. And we have to be also responsible for everybody's feelings. And we have all this pressure to look good while we're doing it.
Oh, yeah.
And it is a recipe for disaster because it's not unless, that's why when people come into the program and they're just like, okay, I need to get this weight off. I'm like, yes, you do. Let's talk about this whole pipeline of bullshit that's happening leading to this. And they're like, wait, what? Like, yeah, the crap.
Realizing that weight is a symptom. It's not the cause. And, that's the biggest thing that I never got, before, that, getting that understanding was, the way I was eating was because of, I was doing that because of what was going on around me.
Right. Stuffing it down because you don't have, I saw this, somebody posted yesterday, it was just in these words, it just said, open up your throat chakra. So anybody who knows anything about throat chakras knows that's your voice. That is, they're talking about when you feel like you don't have a voice. And not just like, because you don't feel well, but because you feel stifled. You feel like you can't say what you mean and you can't speak up for yourself. And it'll either come out like you're not saying anything at all, like you never say anything about how you feel and you're on lockdown, or you're inappropriately spewing all the time. And neither one of those is okay, because you might be thinking, if you're listening to this, like, well, I tell everybody, but that's the way my mom was. She was just like, she didn't care how hurtful it was. She would say it. And her thing was, well, I just speak the truth. So you should respect me because I don't care. I just say what's true. No.
I think we have the same mom, because my mom's exact. I mean, she will literally she has looked at someone who was overweight and called them Moby Dick to their face. And she's like, well, it's true. So I said it. You don't just get to say those things. You don't. That is not okay. And somebody needs to stop you from saying that.
That's not empowerment. When we feel like we have to spew all over people and dump their crap on them, that's not the same as being empowered, because you're still not, that all that is a reactionary thing, because you are not the engine of your life, you're the caboose. And so you're just lashing out at people. That's not the same. So think about that if you're watching this, that it's, being a truth teller is there's not always something noble about that.
Right.
It depends on what your intentions mean something.
Yeah.
So what I think, so it's important, what we've said so far is it's really important for you to set these boundaries. I know in your case, Nancy, that you tried to set these boundaries, like in my case, where you end up getting a divorce.
Right.
We went into counseling many times, and finally it just became apparent that there wasn't really going to be any changes. And so
it was hard. Yeah, because I thought things were getting better with counseling, and he was just hiding it from me. He just wasn't addressing it. And then when it came time for him to address certain things, that was when he was out. He's like, nope, I'm done. You know, you're the one with all the issues. You're the one with all the problems. I'm fine. It's you. And, you know, and that's when you know, it becomes very clear that unfortunately what you've been fighting for to, you know, to try to save isn't worth saving anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is a sad situation to be in, but I can tell everyone from experience that, you know, being alone can be tough, but nothing is worse than being with the wrong person.
No.
There's nothing worse than that. It's excruciating on every level, every day.
Well, and I think when you have to sit back and really evaluate the situation and learn how to do things for yourself, like how to manage, how to balance your checkbook, how to have a budget, how to make sure your bills are paid, how to, you know, is my job going to, you know, continue to make sure I have enough money? You know, all those things, it's such an empowering thing when you actually start to do it. And you realize all along you've had the ability to, you just have chosen not to. And then, you know, what became such a worry and a concern now is such a life building experience for you to be able to go and say, you know, I didn't need that. So now you realize that if I ever did get into another relationship, it is definitely going to be a different situation because I'm not the same person I was in that, you know, and
you're going to attract different people because you're not in that same space.
Right. And, you know, and you have to really look inside and be able to say, okay, what do I need to do for me to become that person? Because what we've been talking about all morning is something I never even understood. And now that's my life. And, and people that meet me or they've known me for years and they see me, they're like, you are not the same. You know, you just look and act differently.
Right.
And it's like,
I remember
I am different.
One of the first times I talked to you, you were in your car and we were on the phone and you were crying and you were saying like, I'm so stuck. I don't know how to move forward. And so it's like night and day. And, you know, so, you know, what I would say to anyone listening, not everybody's going to be in a position where they have to get a divorce. But the point is that you have to say, like LT said, you have to say what you need. You have to say what you want and what your expectations are. And then your job is just not to back off of that. You just hold the line, like, no, this is what I need. Like, so John and I, you know, I love John. He's a wonderful person. He's a wonderful man. He loves me very much. He's very much about, you know, give and take and all of that. But he's still like, so I'll just give it like an example. This isn't a big deal, but like what was happening was, you know, every night, because I stay up later doing work and stuff like that, is that I would be in charge of getting the animals, you know, snacked and getting them out to pee before bed and locking up the house and doing all this stuff. And then we were alternating in the morning who would get up with them because they get up around, you know, 6:30. And, you know, that's exhausting with me trying to do all that stuff at night and then get up early in the morning with them. And so, you know, one morning, John was like, we're always checking in with each other. He's like, hey, how you doing? I'm like, I'm tired. Like, I think what needs to happen here is that I will do nighttime and you do morning. And he was like, okay, I get that. Now, do I think that has occurred to him in the past? Probably. Do I think he was going to wait for me to say something? Yeah. But you know, if somebody's going to do it and not say anything, then hell yeah. You know what I mean? Like, are you going to be like, you know what? I'm going to volunteer to get up early in the mornings and do this. Like, you know, but he recognized that that was fair. That was the right thing to do. And so he's doing it now and it's fine. But, you know, I know that not all of you guys are in that situation where you're going to have that conversation with your significant other and they're going to go, no, I'm not doing that. And so you do have to hold the line. You don't back off of it then and be like, well, okay. And then resent yourself and resent your kids and hate your life and all that stuff. You hold the line and you keep putting that pressure on because that is your expectation.
Right. So what, you know, some people's lives may not be this way, you know, at home, but at work or maybe with like teachers in their kids' classrooms or, you know, people they volunteer with, there's always somebody that wants to keep you in a different place than where you should be. And I think that's what we don't realize, is that, you know, maybe how to carry this over to outside of the home, because,
Absolutely.
you know, it's not right that anybody treats you that way. And everybody has these ideas of, you know, this is your role of a woman and this is your role of a man. And, you know, and I'm going to treat you differently than a man because at work, that's just what we do. And it's how to have that voice, not just at home.
I agree, because something I'm seeing right now in the business world, which is driving me absolutely insane, is women saying to other women, if you, I own 2 businesses. I got shit to do. I have things to get that I have to get done. And I have to be on a lot of the time. And other women in business roles that are business coaches, they coach other business owners, will say, you need to be more in your feminine. You need to get out and play more. You need to get out and, you know, and I'm like, are you saying that, is anybody saying this to men? Like, you're being too masculine. You need to go play. Get out, you know, you get out. And, I mean, no. It's because, you know, we have this view that women need to come off a certain way. And they're too intimidating and they're too bossy and they're too this and they're too that. And it's other women saying it. And so that is driving me nuts right now, but that happens all the time. And there's just also subtle things. Like, there was my daughter when she was in high school, she had a beautiful singing voice. And she wanted to be in, there was the school choir, but then there was this more elite group that was a jazz choir. And I was like, well, just go talk to the instructor and see if you can do an audition. You know, like I would assume that's the way you do it. And so she went to this guy, and she was, I think, you know, a freshman, and, you know, older man. And she goes to him and says, you know, I would like to audition for this. And he says to her, do you really think it's appropriate that you're wearing that tank top? And she had on a tank top with a shirt over it. And he was just like, that seems a little revealing, you know, like, I was like, when she told me about this, she was really intimidated and totally backed off of the audition. And she felt really embarrassed. And she was like, and I was like, and if you knew my daughter, she didn't, I mean, not that I give a shit what kids wear to school, but she was not a kid who was like breaking the rules all the time and stuff with that. Like, she just had a tank top on under her button down, because that was the style, you know? And so I talked to the school. I was like, this is not appropriate. You know, if you guys have a problem with what she's wearing, you can let me know. But she goes to talk to this guy and he's going to talk to her like that. Like, no, that's not all right. But this is the little subtle crap that we get that makes us, you know, we go into the workplace and we do have there's a different standard. Because I'm sure he's not saying anything about any guys you're coming up to ask him about choir, about what they're wearing, no matter what they have on. So these are just the messages that we start to get when we're young. And then as we get older, we realize that we're in an arena where the rules are different. We're getting paid less. Because I grew up, my mom, you know, I was always made aware from a very young age that I was in competition with other women. You know, she was always like, well, look at her. Why aren't you doing what she's doing? And why aren't you, you know? And so I was always like, okay, well, I need to be better than this person and better than this person and better than this person. And it was all women. And so when I actually got out into the workforce, I didn't realize the main problem was men, that being sexually harassed and discriminated against and not paid what I was worth and all these things by these, you know, male dominated systems. And so I totally agree with you. I think that we, you know, it filters out into every area of your life. And I know you said you had, you've had that experience at
Oh,
work.
just recently. I mean, okay, so I'm changing jobs. I'm getting out of prison finally. Woohoo.
So when she says she's getting out of prison, you guys, she's not.
I work in prison, not
She works
in
at the
prison.
Yeah.
But so I have, right. So I won't get paid out for my sick days. And so I have a couple of sick days that I need to take. So I thought about going about it the proper way. So my coworker that we work side by side with, he just, wanted to take a day off. So he put it in as a sick day, and he sent in his request form to our boss, and he said, medical, this is my request for a medical day. And she sent it back and said approved. So 2 days later, and he did it for like on a Monday, and he took the day on Tuesday. So I did it on a Thursday, and I, sent exactly verbatim like he did. And I sent it in for the next day, and she sends it back, berating me and being like, well, do you have a medical doctor's appointment? What is this for? Why is it such late notice? And I'm just like, what's going on here? Why is his response so different than what my response was? And I just, so I just sent back a thing, and I'm just like, okay, I have an appointment and it's tomorrow. Okay, thanks. I'm not giving you detail about it. And it's just, this is a female boss
Right.
that she's very differently treating him than she does me.
Oh, I had a female boss tell me, because I was working for a big corporation, and I was running their weight loss program. And she said to me that no one was going to take me seriously because of how I look.
Oh.
She said, she's like, nobody's going to be able to relate to you. And I would be like, I have pictures before of when I was heavy and stuff like that. And she's like, no one's going to be able to relate to you. It was all about my appearance. And I'm like, there's no way she would say that to a guy. There's no way she would say that. It was just her feeling competitive with me. And this is just the kind of, because there are women who are indoctrinated into this. And then they really do believe that girls should have a totally different standard for how they dress in school. And that, we've all seen that, a viral picture of this girl, 11-year-old girl sent home for wearing leggings because they were too tight and they were revealing, and boys, would be distracted. Are you kidding me right now? Like, this is there were women defending that, like, well, she shouldn't be dressing that way. I don't want my son. And I'm like, if my son got distracted by some girl in leggings, I'd have a talk with my son. I wouldn't be like, that's how we're not teaching boys to take responsibility.
Well, and then even on top of that, you have the discrepancy within the females themselves. One person may look better in those leggings than another person does. And so it's okay for the one that looks better in them to wear them. Yeah. But the one that doesn't look as good, they're the ones that are going to get sent home and asked to change. And, that's another frustrating thing right there.
Oh, absolutely. Where they're talking about, oh, she doesn't, I also had this experience with, again, a client of mine who I happened to see at the pool one day when I was working with people, one-on-one. And she made a comment to me. She's like, look at that girl over there with that bikini on. I cannot believe she would have the nerve. Because this was a girl who weighed a good 250 pounds, and she was a young girl. She had a bikini on. And she's like, I cannot believe she has the nerve to walk around like that. She ought to be ashamed of herself. And I said, listen, if she has the nerve to rock a bikini, then anyone who has the nerve to rock a bikini, I'm like, go for it. That's fine by me. She's not asking me what I think of it. So why do I care? Like, if she comes up and says to me, hey, I need advice on weight loss, I'm happy to talk to her. Otherwise, if she's just confident walking around in a bikini, good for her. But this is what we do. We pass judgment.
This is, and and the same thing, I was a stay-at-home mom, and there is an underbelly of seediness with stay-at-home mothers that I was shocked by. And it's a one-upsmanship, and it's a competition, and it's a which kid is going to which camp or doing which activity and plugging in. And I mean, it was shocking, and it started in kindergarten. That's when I started noticing it, and I did not realize. And there's an ugliness to it, and there's an alienation to it. If you're not doing what they're doing, that you're categorized and you're put in a group, and it's also it's a kind of a tear down your kid type thing to get back at you.
Yeah.
That's what I didn't like. I didn't like the children being the pawns and all of this because they didn't like me.
Right.
And that's what
It's
happened. And I was in a Christian
very
school, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, that happened
So
to me.
it happens everywhere.
We lived briefly in a community where there were a lot of people doing homeschooling, almost like an Amish situation where they were, where somebody would have 10 kids and they're schooling them all at home. And they told my daughter, who was 10 at the time, not developed in the least, guys, just a very skinny little 10-year-old girl, that because she was, her shorts were too short, that they didn't want her at the house anymore. If she couldn't dress more modestly, they didn't want her to come over. And so these are, but it's women, I think, who have nothing going else on in their lives because we're raised to think this is it. This is our focus is on these kids and on being a mother and on, all this is just when you don't have anything else.
Right.
I think there's a sense of jealousy involved in it as well.
There was a jealousy. Yeah.
I think like, the person that said that woman, look at that girl in the bikini, she shouldn't be wearing that. She's probably jealous of her confidence that she's out there rocking that bikini because she doesn't have the confidence, even though she may be the skinny person, to put a bikini on.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of times that those that are critical of us there or, do things to hurt others or hurt us are doing it because of their own insecurities and their own issues. And that's where the boundaries really come into play with all of this, is because you say, that is you own that. You are okay with having that emotion, and that has nothing to do with me whatsoever.
Right. That is, I mean, how does it affect me what somebody else is wearing? And why would I get in the least bit offended by it? Like, it just is. These are things we need to ask ourselves. Whenever I can tell you right now, whenever I feel envious of somebody, I immediately ask myself what the problem is myself. Like I feel envious of this person, so that must mean there's something going on with me. I never think to myself, oh, that must be a problem with this person, that they're getting something I don't have and all of that, because I know the problem is me. It's something going on with me, because when I feel good within myself, I don't have envy for other people.
That's right.
And so, and I can, I was going to say this because about boundaries, because I know that a lot of the people who commented on the post that I made yesterday with all the women chiming in about how men in their lives or their husbands were either oblivious about the fact that a lot of their success was dependent on some woman doing all the work or whatever. My ex-husband, who did not do any of the housework or any of the cooking or any of the grocery shopping or anything like that. I remember he said to me one time that he wanted me to plate up everybody's food. And he said, here's what he said to me. Here's the logic. He said, the least you could do if you're going to make the food is plate it up for everybody. I was like, I didn't really get what he meant by that. But at the time I thought, because he was like, my mom always plated up everybody's food, and his mom worked. His mom was a nurse, and she did all the house cleaning, all of the cooking, all that stuff. And she apparently plated up everybody's food. So for a good while, I plated up everybody's food, and people would sit down at the table, and I would plate up their food, and I would put their plate down. And by the time everybody just would start eating. So by the time that I sat down, everybody was done. And they would, be leaving the table. And I remember saying to my ex-husband at that point, one day I sat down as he was getting up, and I said, as God is my witness, I will never plate up the food again. And he was just like, he just looked at me, and I'm like, he knew I was, and I never did. This is the point. No matter where your boundary is, if it's at work, if it's with a friend, if it's with a colleague, if it's with your mother or whatever, you have got to hold your ground. You've got to stand firm. And like Nancy said, it's scary as hell. I mean, the first time I stood up to my mom, I was like 40, and I thought I was going to barf. I was so scared, but I had to do it. I had to take my life back. I could not let her control me. It had to end. And things get so much better when you decide that it is okay for you to have your feelings and that has nothing to do with their feelings about it. So you are in charge of yourself and they're in charge of themselves. And your job is not to negotiate with them either. To be like, well, okay, well, when we're together, Mom, I will eat meat, but when we're not together, I won't. No, you just say, no, I'm not doing it. It's not a negotiation process. I'm an adult. I can decide what I want to eat. Or, I'm an adult. And if I make this dinner, y'all can eat it or not eat it, but I won't plate it up if my life depends on it. That's basically what I'm saying? So you have to stand your ground and be okay with it and be confident. As good of a marriage as I am in, I always am aware now because I've learned that something could happen. And so I always want to make sure that I wake up every day feeling like I'm okay by myself too. This is a choice for me, not a dependency.
Right.
And I think that's what keeps it makes actually for a healthier relationship when you're not dependent.
I was just going to say that, if you're in a good relationship and you have healthy boundaries with each other, it makes the relationship even better. So, like you said, setting boundaries doesn't mean your relationships are going to end completely. If it's a healthy relationship and you are there working together, it makes it that much better.
Right. And if it's not a healthy relationship, then
right.
Then you're not making your life better by having unhealthy relationships in your life. I can tell you from experience, you're not making your kids' life any better.
That's right.
My ex, my recent ex-husband was not being physically abusive to me, but I'm so grateful now that my kids get to see a loving relationship, because that's not what they saw in my former. I don't want them to grow up thinking that is in even the slightly normal. Now they get to see a loving partnership, and that's what I want for them. Even if I never found it and I was on my own, I would want them to see that. Like, I'm not going to settle.
My mother has said many times, and she is so honest when she says this. She said, if anything was worth it, what I went through, is that you saw differently and you wanted something differently and you verbalized it. And I was verbalizing that at age 21, that I knew that I wanted somebody that loved me, that got excited to see me, that got where we did things together, activities together, where he enjoyed people and being around other people and got along well with his family. My little sensors was already up on all of that, that I want somebody like that, because I don't want this. And so that's why she has said that many, many times, that's what's made it worth it to her.
Yeah.
That I got the benefit of seeing that.
If nothing else, to know what you don't want.
That's right. That's
and therefore what to look for. Yeah. All right, guys, any parting words for women, I guess, in the situation where they're having trouble setting boundaries out of fear of retribution? What do you guys have to say?
I would say do it, because I can guarantee, and I'm not the only one, LT and Nancy, everybody that has learned how to set boundaries, it's not easy in the beginning. It's not. And then, like you said, you wanted to barf. It's very uncomfortable that first time you do it, because you've never done it before. But I can promise you, after you do it one time, you're going to wake up the next day going, ooh, where can I set another one? Because that kind of felt good, because you take yourself back a little bit. And it kind of feels selfish in the beginning, because you're not used to putting yourself on the front burner. You're used to just being a doormat. The more you do it, it turns the tables so much. And especially with your kids, I know there's a lot of women right now who are like, their kids are just acting all kinds of ways, mine included. Let me just put it out there. The more you are calm within yourself, you get yourself right. When you set that boundary, it's taken in a different way. It's not mom going rare. It's mom going, this is what we need to move to step B, and this is what we're going to do. And once you do that, it's a little bit uncomfortable the first time, but it's so much better on the back end of things.
Yes.
Because then it just becomes the expectation, and you
Right.
don't have to constantly rare at everybody all the
You are
time.
teaching people how to treat you when
You're
set
teaching people
down.
how to treat you by
That's
your
exactly.
example of how you demand things for your own self.
And that is the fact that I set boundaries. Here's the crazy thing. Tucker said to me, so Tucker is my 17-year-old, and he is a rare bird, I know, but he said to me, Mom, I base my friendships on how those people treat themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel that makes me feel good, because
Mhm.
I know he's prioritizing the right things when he's looking at people. He's like, is that person a hot mess who is getting into awful relationships, making horrible decisions, doing, what are they, he's basing his view of them not on extraneous crap that's just surfacey stuff, but who
Mhm.
are they? And how are they treating other people, and how are they treating themselves? And that's the kind of example, when we're setting that for our kids, they can see that in other people.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Well, I am so grateful for you ladies opening up today. These are tough topics, and I think that is one of the problems, is we don't talk about them enough. And the more that we talk about personal empowerment, the more we talk about money, sex, things that are taboo, subjects
Mhm.
for girls, the more that we can empower them to make good decisions, then the healthier they're going to be in their lives, physically healthier, mentally healthier, financially healthier, and just able to live their lives instead of growing up having to learn this, like I did, after age like 35 and
Right.
trying to
Right.
catch up, like when I wish I would have known this stuff at such a younger age. But we can take our lives back at any age. And so I hope everyone who's listening to this realizes that. And I'm sure that we will be talking about this again at some point, because this is an ongoing thing. But this is something that we talk about a lot in my program. So if that's something you're interested in, each of us has lost a lot of weight and kept the weight off with my program, not only because it's easy to follow and it's great food, and there's no calorie counting or carb cutting or any of that, it's just common sense, good health, but also because we talk about all of the pipeline, the crap that comes down that make you get crazy eating into your life in the first place. So we work on the behavior end as well. So
yeah, we get very honest, and we're authentic, and it's a community of no judgment, and there's a lot of commonality.
Yeah.
We're a lot more alike than we are different.
That's right.
Right.
A lot of women from different walks of life, but all with we all
Very
have similar
similar.
stories. And it's really a sisterhood. And we really support one another. So if that's something you're interested in, please contact one of us. We're happy to talk to you about it. And thank you again, ladies, for joining me and talking about this. And to everyone who is listening, feel free to comment later. We always come back and look at the comments and answer those. And so have an amazing weekend. We are taking next week off of the InnerStrength Empowerment Hour, but we will be back on the 3rd for our Labor Day, IEH. So have a great weekend, and we will see you soon. Bye.
Bye.